It was late afternoon on the Texas plains. The sun burned red across the horizon. A young cowboy lay collapsed by the roadside, his shirt torn and stained with blood, his horse scattered in panic. People passed by, turning away, thinking he was just another drifter. A small girl with blonde hair carrying a basket of old bread stopped. She knelt down and placed her only water bottle to his lips. Through his delirium, he heard her trembling whisper, "Don't die. My mama and I already lost Papa." Days later, the cowboy opened his eyes in the small house of a widow and her daughter. Her name was Clara. She was 32 years old, a widow trying to survive in the harsh Texas wilderness. Her husband had died 3 years ago in an oil rig accident, leaving her alone with their 10-year-old daughter, Lily. They lived in a small wooden shack on the edge of town, barely making ends meet. Clara worked odd jobs, washing clothes, mending fences, anything to put food on the table. On her finger, she still wore her wedding ring, though it had turned rusty and dull. She couldn't bring herself to take it off. It was the last piece of her old life, the life when she wasn't alone. The cowboy's name was Ethan. He was 34 years old, a drifter who moved from ranch to ranch, taking whatever work he could find. He had lost his own family years ago when wealthy landowners had taken their farm by force. His parents had fought back and paid with their lives. Since then, Ethan had wandered, carrying nothing but the clothes on his back and an old guitar, cracked and worn but still capable of making music. He trusted no one, stayed nowhere long, and believed he deserved nothing better than the lonely life he lived. That afternoon, Lily had been walking home from town with a basket of day-old bread the baker had given her out of pity. She saw the cowboy lying in the dirt, blood seeping from a gash on his head. His horse must have thrown him. Maybe he'd been robbed. Maybe he'd just collapsed from hunger and exhaustion. Lily didn't know, and she didn't care. All she saw was someone dying, and she couldn't just walk away. She knelt beside him, her small hands shaking as she lifted his head and pressed her water bottle to his cracked lips. "Please don't die," she whispered. "Please." When Clara found them, her first instinct was fear. A strange man, unconscious and bleeding. This could be trouble, this could be dangerous. But then she looked at her daughter's face, saw the tears streaming down Lily's cheeks, and she knew she had no choice. "Help me get him inside," Clara said quietly. Together, they dragged Ethan into their tiny shack and laid him on the only bed they had. Clara sent Lily to sleep on the floor while she tended to the stranger's wounds through the night. The neighbors noticed, of course. By the next day, the whole town was whispering. "That widow woman took in a drifter. She's got a strange man sleeping in her house." What kind of example is that for her daughter? The gossip was cruel and relentless. Some people stopped buying Clara's sewing work. Others crossed the street to avoid her. But Clara said nothing. She just kept cleaning Ethan's wounds, feeding him thin broth, and praying he would wake up. On the third day, Ethan's eyes finally opened. He looked around, confused and disoriented. Where was he? Who were these people? Clara sat beside him, her face tired but kind. "You're safe," she said simply. "My daughter found you on the road. You were dying." Ethan tried to sit up, but his body was too weak. "Why?" he asked hoarsely. "Why would you help me?" Clara looked at him for a long moment. "Because someone needed to, and because my daughter asked me to." She stood up and turned away. "Rest now. We'll talk when you're stronger." That night, as Ethan drifted back to sleep, he heard Lily's soft voice in the next room. "Mama, will he be okay?" Clara's reply was gentle. "I hope so, sweetheart." Lily was quiet for a moment. "People say we shouldn't help him, but Papa always said being kind is never wrong." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She pulled her daughter close. "Your Papa was right. Being kind is never wrong." Later, Clara sat alone in the darkness and thought, "I don't need him to repay us. I just want my daughter to understand that kindness is never a mistake, even when the world says it is." The days that followed were slow and quiet. Ethan was too weak to leave, too injured to do much besides rest. Clara continued her daily work, but now she also cooked for 3 instead of 2. The portions were even smaller, the soup even thinner, but nobody complained. Lily would sit by Ethan's bedside and tell him stories about school, about the prairie, about her father who she barely remembered. Ethan listened, and for the first time in years, he felt something other than emptiness. As Ethan slowly regained his strength, he started helping around the house. At first, just small things: chopping firewood, carrying water, fixing a broken chair. Clara protested at first. "You should rest. You're still healing." But Ethan shook his head. "I need to do something. I can't just take from you without giving back." So Clara let him help, and slowly, the dynamic in the small house began to shift. They weren't just a widow and a stranger anymore. They were becoming something else, something that felt almost like family. One evening, Lily discovered Ethan's old guitar leaning against the wall. Her eyes lit up with excitement. "Do you play?" she asked eagerly. Ethan looked at the instrument, his face shadowed with old pain. "I used to, before everything fell apart." Lily picked up the guitar carefully and brought it to him. "Will you play for us, please?" She looked at him with such hopeful eyes that Ethan couldn't refuse. His fingers were stiff and uncertain as he strummed the first chord. The sound was rough, the guitar out of tune, but it was music, real music. Ethan began to play an old country song, and his voice, rusty from disuse, filled the small room. Lily clapped her hands with delight. Even Clara, standing in the doorway, found herself smiling. When the song ended, Lily begged for another and then another. That night, the 3 of them sat together, singing and laughing, and for a few precious hours, the weight of their struggles lifted. The tiny shack felt less like a prison and more like a home. As the weeks passed, Clara and Ethan began to talk more. Late at night, after Lily had fallen asleep, they would sit by the small fire and share their stories. Ethan told Clara about his family, about the land they had lost, about the violence that had torn his world apart. "I've been running ever since," he said quietly. "I didn't think I deserved to belong anywhere anymore." Clara understood that feeling more than he knew. "After my husband died, I felt the same way, like I was just surviving, not really living. Every night I'm afraid we'll lose this house too, that we'll have nothing left." Ethan looked at her with newfound understanding. "But you keep going. For her." He nodded toward Lily's sleeping form. Clara's eyes softened. "She's all I have. She's my reason for everything." Ethan felt something stir in his chest, something he thought had died long ago. Hope. The idea that maybe, just maybe, he could have a reason too. The next day, Ethan noticed the roof was leaking badly. Without saying anything, he climbed up with whatever materials he could find and patched the holes. His hands were still shaky, his body still weak, but he worked until the job was done. When Clara came home and saw what he'd done, she didn't know what to say. "You didn't have to do that," she finally managed. Ethan smiled. "I wanted to. You've given me so much. Let me give something back." That evening, Clara took Ethan's torn cowboy jacket and carefully mended it by candlelight. She stitched each rip with care, reinforcing the worn seams. When she handed it back to him the next morning, Ethan held it like it was made of gold. "Thank you," he said softly. "I haven't had anyone do something like this for me in years." Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Something neither of them was quite ready to name yet. Lily started calling him Uncle Ethan. At first, Ethan didn't know how to react. He wasn't anyone's uncle. He wasn't anyone's anything. But the way Lily said it with such natural affection made his heart ache in the best possible way. One night, Clara found Lily sneaking out of bed. "Where are you going, sweetheart?" Lily put a finger to her lips. "I just want to make sure Uncle Ethan is okay. Sometimes he has nightmares." Clara's heart melted. Her daughter's capacity for love and care was boundless. One afternoon, Ethan took down his guitar and hung it on the wooden wall of the shack. Clara looked at him questioningly. "Why there?" Ethan smiled. Because music only sounds beautiful when someone is listening. And here, I have people who listen. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. This man, this stranger who had stumbled into their lives, was becoming part of their story, part of their home. That night, Clara sat alone with her journal, a tattered notebook she'd kept since her husband died. By the dim light of a single candle, she wrote, "I thought I was saving a stranger. I thought I was just doing a kind deed and he would leave. But he's brought something back to this house that I thought was gone forever. Laughter, music, hope. He's brought my daughter joy again. And maybe, just maybe, he's bringing something back to me too." Clara closed the journal and whispered into the darkness, "I thought we saved him, but maybe he's been saving us all along." The peace couldn't last forever. Clara had known that deep down. There were debts. There were always debts. Her husband had borrowed money before he died, trying to keep the small piece of land they owned. Now, 3 years later, the bill had come due. The man who came collecting was Mr. Dalton, the wealthiest landowner in the county. He owned half the town and wanted the other half. He rode up to Clara's shack on a black horse, flanked by 2 of his men, looking like judgment itself. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice smooth and cold, "I think you know why I'm here." Clara stood in the doorway, her chin raised despite her fear. "I know about the debt, Mr. Dalton. I'm working to pay it. I just need more time." Dalton smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Time's up, I'm afraid. You owe $500. I'll give you 1 week to pay in full, or this land becomes mine." $500. It might as well have been 5,000. Clara had maybe $30 to her name. Dalton's eyes drifted past Clara to where Ethan stood in the shadow of the doorway. His smile turned cruel. "I see you've taken in a stray, a drifter cowboy." He looked back at Clara. "You know what people are saying, don't you? About you and him? A widow shouldn't be so careless with her reputation." Clara's face burned with shame and anger. "What I do in my home is my business." Dalton leaned forward in his saddle. "Not when you owe me money, it isn't. Here's a deal, Mrs. Thompson. Send the cowboy away. Prove you're a respectable woman, and I'll give you more time to pay." The words hung in the air like poison. Clara felt sick. She looked back at Ethan, saw the pain in his eyes. He knew what was coming. That night, after Dalton had left, Ethan began packing his few belongings. "What are you doing?" Clara asked, though she already knew. "I'm leaving," Ethan said quietly. "I won't let you lose your home because of me. I won't let people destroy your reputation. You and Lily deserve better." Lily burst into the room, tears streaming down her face. "No, you can't leave. Your family." Ethan knelt down and hugged the little girl, his own eyes wet. "I have to, sweetheart. I'm causing problems for you and your mama." Clara felt her heart breaking. She wanted to tell him to stay. She wanted to tell him that he mattered more than the house, more than what people thought. But fear held her tongue. What if she lost everything? What if she couldn't protect Lily? That night no one slept. The house that had been filled with music and laughter was now heavy with silence and grief. The next day was the town meeting. Everyone gathered in the church to discuss community matters. Clara attended, hoping to find some way to solve her problem. But Dalton stood up and made his move. "I want to discuss the matter of Mrs. Clara Thompson," he announced. "She owes a significant debt and is harboring a vagrant in her home. This reflects poorly on our community." The murmur started immediately. Clara felt dozens of eyes on her, judging, condemning. "That woman has no shame," someone whispered loudly. "A widow with a strange man under her roof." Another voice joined in, setting a terrible example for her daughter. Clara wanted to sink into the floor. She wanted to disappear. But then she heard the church door open. Ethan walked in, his head held high despite the stares and whispers. He walked straight to the front of the church and faced Dalton. "You want to talk about shame?" Ethan said, his voice steady. "Let's talk about it. This woman saved my life when I was dying in the dirt. She had nothing, but she shared what little she had. She asked for nothing in return. She showed me kindness when the whole world had shown me cruelty." His voice grew stronger. "You call me a vagrant? A parasite? Maybe I am. But she saw something in me worth saving. And I swear, from this day forward, I will spend my life protecting this family, this house, this woman who showed me what it means to be human again." The church had gone completely silent. Ethan pulled his guitar from his back and began to play. His voice rang out, singing a song about a strong woman, about a little girl with a heart of gold, about finding home when you thought you'd lost everything. The melody was simple but powerful. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. Several other people in the church were crying too. When the song ended, Ethan looked directly at Dalton. "You can take the land, you can take the house, but you can't take away what we've built here. Love, family, hope." An old farmer stood up from the back pew. "I'll contribute to Clara's debt," he said gruffly. $20. A shopkeeper stood next. "I'll add 30. One by one, people began standing, offering what they could. Not everyone. Some still sneered and turned away. But enough. Enough to show that kindness could still exist. That community could still mean something. Dalton's face turned red with fury. He slammed his hand on the pew. "This isn't over," he hissed. But his power had been challenged. The spell had been broken. Outside the church, Clara turned to Ethan, her voice shaking. "You didn't have to do that. You didn't have to risk everything for us." Ethan took her hands gently. "Don't you understand yet? You and Lily are my everything now. I'm not running anymore. I'm not leaving. This is where I belong." Lily threw her arms around both of them, and the three of them stood there, holding each other, while the rest of the town watched, some with approval, some with disgust, but none of it mattered anymore. That evening, as they walked home together, the sun setting orange and gold across the prairie, Clara felt something shift inside her. Fear was still there. Uncertainty was still there. But so was something else. Something stronger, love. Not the desperate love of grief and loneliness, but real love. The kind that chooses to stay even when leaving would be easier. If you believe gratitude can turn into love, drop a below. Follow LT Stories for more moments that touch the soul. After the confrontation in the church, everything changed. Ethan didn't leave. The community had raised enough money to give Clara breathing room on her debt, though not enough to pay it off completely. But it was a start. More importantly, Ethan had decided he wasn't going anywhere. He found work at a nearby ranch doing honest labor for honest pay. Every penny he earned, he brought home to Clara. For the debt, he'd say. But they both knew it was more than that. It was his way of saying, "I'm invested, I'm committed, I'm home." Clara's small wooden shack began to transform. Ethan repaired the sagging porch. He fixed the broken windows. He rebuilt the fence that had been falling apart for years. The work was slow because he only had evenings and weekends, but piece by piece, the house became stronger, more solid. Lily would follow him around, handing him tools, chattering endlessly. "Uncle Ethan, when you're done, can we paint the door blue? Mama loves blue." Ethan smiled. "Whatever your mama wants, we'll make it happen." One day, Lily started calling him something different. They were having dinner, just the three of them, when Lily looked up from her plate and said, "Pa Cowboy, can you pass the salt?" The room went completely still. Clara's hand froze halfway to her cup. Ethan's eyes went wide. "What did you call me?" Lily looked uncertain suddenly, afraid she'd done something wrong. I called you Pa Cowboy. Is that okay?" Ethan's throat tightened with emotion. He reached across the table and took the little girl's hand. "That's more than okay, sweetheart. That's the best thing anyone's ever called me." Clara excused herself from the table, overwhelmed by emotions she couldn't name. Ethan found her later on the porch, staring out at the prairie. "I'm sorry if that made you uncomfortable," he said softly. "Lily calling me Pa." Clara shook her head. "It's not that. It's just..." She took a deep breath. "For so long I've held on to the past. Held on to my husband's memory so tight that I couldn't let anything new in. But watching you with Lily, seeing how you care for her, how you care for us." Her voice broke. "Maybe it's time I let myself believe in new beginnings." Slowly, Clara removed her rusty wedding ring and placed it in a small wooden box. She didn't throw it away. She didn't hide it. She simply put it to rest with love and respect for what it represented. Then she turned to Ethan. He pulled an old leather bandana from his pocket, worn and faded, but clean. "This was my father's," he said. "It's all I have left of my old life. I want you to have it." Clara took it, understanding the significance. This was his way of saying goodbye to his past and choosing a future with her. They decided to plant a garden together. All three of them worked side by side, turning the hard earth, planting sunflower seeds in careful rows. "Sunflowers always face the light," Ethan explained to Lily. "No matter how dark it gets, they turn toward hope." Lily smiled. "Like us." Clara looked at her daughter, then at Ethan, and realized the child was right. That's exactly what they were doing, turning toward hope. The sunflowers grew quickly in the Texas sun. Within weeks, tiny green shoots appeared. Within months, tall stalks reached toward the sky. The house, once surrounded by bare dirt and despair, was now ringed with gold. Neighbors would ride by and comment on the transformation. Some with approval, some with lingering judgment, but all of them noticed. The widow's house was no longer a place of sadness. It was becoming something beautiful. Dinners became sacred time. Clara would cook whatever they could afford, usually simple fare, beans and cornbread, maybe a bit of salted meat if they were lucky. But Ethan would bring out his guitar, and they would eat to music. Lily would dance around the small room, her laughter like bells. And Clara would watch, her heart so full it almost hurt. This was family, not the one she'd lost, but a new one. Different, but just as precious. One night, after Lily had gone to bed, Clara and Ethan sat on the porch under a sky full of stars. Clara rested her head on his shoulder, something she never thought she'd do with anyone again. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked quietly. "Taking me in, all the trouble it's caused?" Clara was silent for a moment. Then she smiled. "The only thing I regret is not finding you sooner." She lifted her head and looked at him. "You asked about repaying a debt, but you don't understand. You already did. You gave my daughter her smile back. You gave me a reason to believe life could be good again. You gave us a home, not just a house." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden carving he'd been working on in secret. It was a heart, simple but beautiful, with 3 figures carved into it. A woman, a man, and a child, all holding hands. "I made this for you," he said. "For us." Clara took it, tears streaming down her face. "It's perfect. We're perfect. Not because we're without problems, but because we choose each other every single day." If you believe a home can bloom from loss, press like and follow LT's stories. Share this with someone who needs hope today. 1 year had passed since the day Lily found Ethan dying by the roadside. The small wooden shack was barely recognizable now. The porch was solid. The roof didn't leak. The windows sparkled in the sunlight. And all around the house, sunflowers stood tall and golden, their faces turned toward the sky. It looked like the home of a family that had something to live for, because they did. Lily had drawn a picture at school. When she brought it home, she shyly showed it to Clara and Ethan. It was a drawing of 3 people standing in front of a house surrounded by flowers. At the top, in her careful child's handwriting, she had written, "Our family." Clara looked at the drawing for a long time, her eyes filled with tears. Then she carefully took it and placed it on the wall, right next to the wooden heart Ethan had carved. "This is who we are," she said softly. "This is what we've built." That evening, Clara opened the wooden box where she'd placed her old wedding ring a year ago. She held it for a moment, remembering, loving, grieving. Then she placed Lily's drawing next to it and closed the box. "Thank you," she whispered to the memory of her first husband. "Thank you for loving me. Thank you for giving me Lily. And thank you for teaching me that love doesn't end. It just grows and changes and makes room for new people." She felt at peace in a way she hadn't in years. She found Ethan outside, tending to the sunflowers. She walked up to him and took his hand. "I have something to say," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "When you first came here, you were a stranger. Someone we helped because it was the right thing to do. Then you became a guest, then a friend, then family. She paused, gathering courage. But I don't want to call you a guest anymore. I don't even want to call you family. I want to call you husband. I want to call you Lily's father, if you still want us. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He pulled her close and held her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Want you? Clara, you and Lily are the only thing I've ever wanted. The only thing that's ever made sense. I told you before, I'm not leaving. I'm not running. This is where I belong. He kissed her forehead. Not as a guest, not as someone repaying a debt, but as a husband, as a father, as the man who gets to love you both for the rest of his life. They were married a month later, nothing fancy, just a simple ceremony in the same church where Ethan had stood up and defended them. Lily was the flower girl, beaming with pride in a dress the townswomen had sewn together as a gift. When the preacher said, "You may kiss your bride," Ethan cupped Clara's face in his work-roughened hands and kissed her gently. The church erupted in applause. Even some of the people who had once judged them were clapping now. Love has a way of changing hearts. That evening, the three of them stood in front of their house, the sunflowers swaying gently in the breeze. Ethan picked up his guitar and began to play. Clara wrapped her arm around his waist. Lily danced barefoot in the dirt, laughing at nothing and everything. The sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink, painting the whole world in warmth. This was home, this was family, this was everything that mattered. Ethan paused his playing and looked at his wife and daughter. "You know what the funny thing is?" he said. "I thought my life ended the day I lost my family. I thought I was just wandering, waiting to die. But I was really just walking toward you. Toward this. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another." Clara smiled and leaned against him. "Real value isn't in land or money or what we own. It's in this, in the people who stand beside us, in the love we choose every single day, in building something together that's stronger than what we could build alone." The gate to their property stood open, welcoming. Inside, lights glowed warm in the windows. The sunflowers stood guard like golden sentinels, and three people who had once been broken stood together, whole at last. Because sometimes, one small act of kindness can change everything. Sometimes, saving someone's life means they end up saving yours. If you believe kindness can build a family, follow LT Stories for more healing tales. Like and share if this touched your heart. Sometimes the best things in life come from the smallest acts of love.